Hello everyone, I'm C. Ashish Sarna on behalf of GM Test Series, and today we are going to discuss the mistakes students commit in income tax. Let's start the test series. Question number one. Mr. Kamal came for a concert in India organized by White Fox and he was paid 90 lakh rupees on 6/7/2019. How much TDS required to be deducted for the payment made to Mr. Kamal under which section? 194J, 194C, 194E, 194H. It's a theoretical question completely, and it has been specifically provided in section 194E for the entertainers and for the sportsmen coming from outside India to India and performing here. So TDS will be deducted under section 194E at the rate 20% plus surcharge. So the answer is C. Under which of the following cases power vested in the civil court can be exercised by income tax authority even if no proceedings is pending? Income has to be concealed. So this is a very logical question. These kind of questions, the answer should come from within you. So if power vested in the civil court can be exercised by income tax authority even if no proceeding is pending, when income has to be concealed, yes, that can be done. Then in that case can be done to facilitate quick collection of information or request from income tax authorities outside India. Yes, in this case also it can be done. If a person in question has been to jail once, if a person has been to jail once, that doesn't mean civil court can it's a power vested in a civil court that can be exercised by income tax authority even if no proceedings is pending. So the third option cannot be, is not out of the preview. If person's case has completed recently, so it doesn't make any sense. So the possible answer could be 1 and 2. So the answer could be B, 1 and 2. No notice shall be issued beyond 6 years prior to the search unless the income represented in the form of asset which have been escaped amount to or is likely to an amount to dash or more in the relevant year or an aggregate in relevant assessment years. Answer is completely theoretical. It's 50 lakh. Concept of total merger applicable in case of dash and partial merger in case of dash. It's again a complete theoretical question which requires no explanation. Answer is C. Section 264 and section 263. Section 154. Fifth, Sardar Patel NBSC gave a loan for which repayment is 2,50,000, which is to be made in cash. Each installment amounts to rupees 15,000. How much penalty is livable for violating section 269 ST? Nil, 2,50,000, 15,000, 2 lakh. Exception has been given in section 269 ST that if a payment is made to a company or a banking company, then there is no violation of section there 269 ST. So the answer will be nil. Again, a theoretical question where an application of section 265C, i.e., to income tax settlement commission for any assessment has been made, the assessee shall be liable to pay simple under section 263B at a rate of 1% every month or a part of month comprised in the following period: 1st April of the previous month to date of regular assessment, 1st April of previous year to the date of making application, 1st April of the previous year to date of order, 1st April of assessment year to the date of making application. So the answer is D. 1st April of the assessment year to the date of making the application. If any books, money, any books of accounts belong to any person other than the person referred in section 153A, then the books of accounts shall be handed over to. Very logical question. It shall be handed over to the officer who has jurisdiction of that assessee, and that jurisdictional officer will carry out all the proceedings in section 153C for that assessee, for that particular person. So the answer is going to be A. Person, assessing officer having jurisdiction over such person, other person. Answer is A. Which of the following can be filed without fees? Appeal to CIT appeals? No, because fees of rupees 1000 in case of quantum and rupees 250 in case of penalty has to be paid. Appeal for the ITAT for the quantum 10,000 is to be paid. For the penalty 500 rupees is to be paid. Memorandum of cross objection, there's no such fees for this. It is because memorandum of cross objection is not a appeal. It is we are filing if a department has filed an appeal against us, so we can file cross objections to that appeal, to the grounds of appeal raised by the revenue authority. Against that, we can raise a cross objection that they are not valid and a case is very strong and this is in favor of the assessee. So the answer is C. Application for revision of Ordinance Section 264 also, in this case also, fees has to be paid. Which of the following orders applicable before CIT appeals? Order under Section 143, order made in Section 163, order imposing penalty 271B or 271BB, and order passed by assessing under Section 92 CD. All these are applicable before CIT appeals. So the answer will be E. All of the above. Time limit for issuance of notice under for intimation under Section 143(1) and sending the same to the SSC is as simple as that 1 year from the end of the financial year return was made. So the answer is B. Question number 1. Discuss and compute liability for TDS in cases stated below for the year ended 31st March 2020. Mr. X resident acquired a house property at Mumbai from Mr. Y for a consideration of rupees 90 lakh on 26/2019. On the same day, he made separate transactions, thereby acquiring a plot in Kolkata from Mr. C for a sum of rupees 49 lakh 50,000 and rural agriculture land from Mr. D for a consideration of rupees 60 lakh. So it's a very simple question. So we have acquired a property for more than 50 lakh. So there is a liability for TDS of 1% under section 194 IA. So there will be a TDS of 1% which will be deducted because in the present case SSC is a transferee, so he will deduct tax at the rate 1%. On the same day, he has made separate transaction for a urban plot in Kolkata, in which purchase amount is less than 50,000. So there is no requirement of any TDS. And for rural agriculture land, there was never any kind of liability of deducting TDS in case of rural agriculture land because it is outside the preview of immovable property subject to tax. Since the house property in Mumbai, the consideration for transfer exceeds 50 lakh, Mr. X being a transfer is required to deduct at the rate 1%. And for the second part, he is not required to deduct TDS because the consideration is less than 50 lakh. And for the third thing, he had transferred rural agriculture land since same is specifically excluded from the scope of immovable property for the purpose of TDS under section 194 IA. Second part, a commission of rupees 50,000. Whenever you hear the word commission, use a section called 194H will strike to your mind, which says that TDS has to be deducted in case commission is being paid above 15,000 rupees to a resident. So in this case, 50,000 were retained by the consignee ABC Packaging Limited and not remitted to the consigner. In this, the payment is not being made right now, but while remitting the sales, examine the obligation. But once the payment has to be made, it is for sure. It is a constructive payment. So TDS will be liable to be deducted. 194 I require TDS at the rate 5% from commission and brokerage payments to resident. However, no tax is to be deducted as source where the amount of such tax do not exceed 15,000. In the given case, ABC Packaging Limited, the consignee has not remitted the commission of rupees 50,000 to the consigner XYZ developers while remitting the sales consideration. Since the retention of commission by the consignee agent amounts to constructive payment, so it is a very important word that constructive payment is being made of the same to him by the consignor principal. TDS is to be deducted on the commission amount. So commission at the rate 5% will be deducted. Next question. Mr. X won a motor car in a lucky draw held by V Marketing. So it's a question of lottery winnings. So TDS will be under section 194B, subject to the satisfaction of the conditions and the facts of the case. The market price is 4 lakh. It should be V Marketing only. V Marketing honestly gave the card to Mr. S without TDS. It shows examine the liability of P Marketing to make such payment. It should be V Marketing. So in this case, there's a lottery winning, so TDS has to be deducted since it is in kind. So the V marketing should make arrangement of making the paying the TDS. It may collect it from Mr. S that he has won a lottery and TDS of at the rate 30% has to be deducted, or so the equal amount may be collected from him and should be deposited in the revenue account. And in case if this has not been done, so there will be a penalty and a prosecution can also be launched against V marketing. So this is again 1000 rupees. Its amount is exceeding 1000. TDS has to be 10,000. TDS has to be deducted at the rate 30%. In this case, he has won a car of rupees 4 lakh, where the winnings are only in kind. The responsibility calls upon to ensure that before the to ensure tax is paid by the winner of the prize before the prize is released in his favor. This can be done by collecting the from the winner equal amount of TDS to be deducted in kind and meeting the liability of TDS before releasing the winning. For this purpose, value of winning in kind shall be taken as the market value of the car. In the present case, PV Marketing has released the car without ensuring the payment at the rate 30% of being the value of car by Mr. S. So V marketing is liable to for penalty under section 271C and prosecution under section 276B. Raj is working with AB Limited. He is entitled to salary of rupees 60,000 per month with respect from 1/4/2019. He has house property which is self-occupied. He is paying interest of 80,000. The loan was taken for construction of house. He has notified his employer there is a loss of 80,000 in respect of house property for the financial year. So the proper calculation has to be done. So TDS is to be deducted if it is above 5 lakh. If it is below 5 lakh, so in the present year there is no liability for any there won't be any tax, so there won't be any liability for deducting TDS. 60,000 into 12, 7 lakh 20,000, less standard deduction 50,000, because it's a case of salary, so standard deduction will be allowed. Income from the head house property, there's a loss of 80,000. There is no deduction given. Total income 5,90,000. TDS will be as per the applicable slab rates 30,500 plus surcharge. So TDS will be deducted of such this one. Cash of rupees 25 lakh was seized on 12/9/2019. The search conducted under section 132. The SC moved an application on 27/10/2019 to release such cash after explaining the source thereof, which was turned down by the department. The SC seeks opinion. In case a cash is seized or any asset is seized that can be released, for that application has to be made within 50 days, 30 days. Application has to be made within 30 days from the end of the month in which asset has been seized. And if the assessing officer is satisfied that it is from the explained source and the nature is explained, the source is explained, then he may release after taking approval from the principal commissioner or the commissioner as the case may be. But if he is not satisfied, this is up to him. He may not release it. But while releasing, he will recover the existing liability if any. Advance tax is not the existing liability. And there's a time limit of 120 days in which he has to release. The proviso to section 132B1 provides where this person concerned makes an application to the AO within 30 days from the end of the month in which asset was seized for release of the asset. The nature and source of the is explained to satisfaction of the assessing officer. Then assessing officer may, with the prior approval of the principal chief commissioner or chief commissioner, release the asset after recovering the existing liability under Income Tax Act 1961 out of such asset. Existing liability do not include advance tax. Such asset or portion has to be within 120 days from the date on which last of the authorization for search under section 132 was executed. However, if the assessing of in the note it is given that if it is not to the satisfaction of the AO about the source and nature of the asset seized, he may not release it. Question number 3. Narges, a resident of Indian, owned for the financial year ending 31/3/2020, a house property in London purchased in 2007, a shop in Sydney purchased in June 2009, and space in commercial complex in New York purchased in April 2017. She is having authority to operate the bank account maintained with Citibank London of a company owned by her daughter and son-in-law since July 2018. She has been served in July 2020 with a notice under Section 148 for assessment year 2006-7 to 2019-20. She, for the reason of challenging the action of AO for issuing notice under section for the last 13 years, seeks your opinion. In case for issuing a notice under section, maximum time limit is 6 years. But if anybody has foreign assets, the time limit gets automatically will be the last 16 years. So it's a case of foreign assets, possession of foreign assets. So the time limit will be 16 years, subjects to the facts of the case. Because the first job, the purchase in 2007. So, so the first year shall be assessment year 2008-9. 2008-9, because the financial year will be 2007-8 and assessment year 8-9. So it cannot go beyond that time limit because first foreign asset was only purchased in 2007. Solution is, yeah, we're straight away going to come here. Under section 140, extended time limit of 16 years available for issuance of notice. In this case, income chargeable to say deemed assessment for the since certain assets located in the simple theoretical line. So therefore, on the basis assessing has found the reason to believe that assessment and consequently issued notice under section 148 for 13 assessment years, that is 2006-7 to 2019-20. Accordingly, in the view, the action of issuing notice under section 148 for the assessment for the 11 assessment years, that is 8-9 to 19-20, is in order. However, he cannot issue notice in section 148 for the assessment 2006-7 and 7-8 since the time limit is 4 years or 6 years, the case may be has lapsed. Because the asset only was acquired in the assessment year 2008-9. The assessment of for Foundation Bank Limited for the assessment system was made under section 143.3 on 30th November 2017 after allowing deduction of section 136(1)(7) and deduction in respect of foreign exchange rate difference claimed in return of income. Subsequently, two notices of reassessment were issued on section 148. An order for this was passed on 31st December 2019, which did not deal with the above deductions, that is deduction of section 31(6)(7), which was dealt in original assessment proceeding in section 143.3. Later, the principal commissioner, after examining the assessment records, initiated revisionary proceeding in section 263 for different deduction under section 36(1)(6) and deduction in respect of the foreign exchange rate difference, which was original assessment proceedings section 143.3. The bank claims the order passes time barred by limitation. Is this a claim? Yes. Is it? Is it? Yes. The answer is yes, because the original assessment proceeding dealt with 36(1)(7) and deduction in respect of foreign exchange. The other proceedings under section 148 were separate and did not deal with any of these issues. So the time limit will be for this particular thing for 36(1)(7) and deduction in respect of foreign exchange shall be seen from the original assessment proceedings when this issue was originally dealt. So maximum time limit is 2 years from the end of the financial year in which the order is passed. From 2018, 31/3/2018, it will be 31st March 2020. Order passed is on 31st May 2020, which is barred by limitation. In the present case, order passed for assessment in 600 was under section 143.3 was on 31/11/2008, allowing the deduction of section N so and so. Further notices or reassessment were issued. An order was passed under section 147 on 31/12/2019, which did not deal with the above deductions. Certain income not shown by assessee were assessed under section 147. As simple as that. Later, the Commissioner passed an order under section 263 on 31st May 2020 for disallowing the deduction under section 36(1)(7). And in respect of foreign exchange rate difference, which has not been taken up with the reassessment proceedings held, period of limitation under section 263 matter which does not form the subject matter of the reassessment shall be reckoned for the date of original order under section 143.3 and shall not from the date of reassessment order in section 143.7. Therefore, the order should have been passed by 31/3/2020, and the order passed by income tax CIT on is on 31st May 2020 is barred by limitation. And this case, this observation was also followed by Supreme by the Bombay High Court judgment in the case of ICICI Bank Limited. So it's a very good case law. Yeah. This is a completely theoretical question. Tax recovery officer can recover the areas of demand from the cessation default out of the sale proceeds of the property attached after making a proclamation. How can the proclamation can be made under this? Is there any time limit for the sale of attached property? Yes, obviously there will be a time limit, and the proclamation can be made as per the rules given. Mobile property rules 36 and 36 of Schedule 2. Where the tax officer order the sale of mobile, he shall issue a proclamation in the language of the district of the intended sale, specifying the time and place of the whether the sale is subject to confirmation or not. So these are the basic conditions which assessing officer has to justify before selling any property. The proclamation can be made by a beat of drum or any customary mode in case of property attached by actual seizure in a village where the property was seized, or if a property was seized in a town or city in a locality in which it was seized, at such places as a tax recovery officer may direct. In case a property was attached otherwise by actual seizure in some places, the tax officer may direct a copy of proclamation should be affixed in a conspicuous part of the office of the tax recovery officer. So this is a completely theoretical question. And for the second part, the sale of immovable property has to be made before the expiry of 7 years from the end of the financial year, in which order giving the rise to demand of any tax, interest, penalty, or any sum for the recovery of which immovable property has been attached has become conclusive under the provisions of section 245 I order of settlement under section 245D4 is deemed to be conclusive as a matter stated therein or has become final in terms of provision of chapter 20 appeals and revisions. However, the CBDT may, for the reasons in writing, extend the aforesaid period not exceeding 3 years. So it's a completely theoretical question. Question number 6. Can the transmission, wheeling, and SLDC charges paid by company engaging in distribution and supply of electricity under service contract to a transmission company be treated as fees for technical services so to attract tedious provision under section 194J or alternative under section 143C? So there are three things involved. Can the transmission, wheeling, and SLDC charges paid by a company engaged in distribution supply of under subsidy to a transmission company, those which company which is supplying the electricity to the mediator, they are kind of mediator. So this question is kind of case law itself, which has been evolved from advanced ruling of Ajmer Vidyut Vitram Nigam Limited in 2013, 353 ITR 640. Facts of the case: in the present case, the application is a government company engaged in a business of distribution and supply of electricity to customers in various districts of Rajasthan. The activity of distribution is preceded. First of all, there'll be production and its transmission from a point of production to the point of distribution. The production is by a generating company, which is a separate entity, and transmission to the applicant is through transmission system of the transmission. The transmission company carries electrical energy to the applicant as a distribution network of applicant. Applicant then distribute the energy to the end customers. So we are providing electricity to the end customers. We are the mediator from the generating company and to the end customers. The transmission electricity from a point of generation to a point of distribution is termed as wheeling. Application pays transmission and wheeling charges to the for the wheeling, which is contents as statutory charges. The transmission company also function as a SLDC, which is responsible for general coordination of production and transmission of electricity to ensure uniform distribution in the state. The applicant pays to the transmission company SLDC charges, which is claimed to statutory in nature since levy in terms of Electricity Act 2003. The applicant contended that above charges are not in nature of fees for technical services to attract tedious provisions. On the following ground, transmission does not involve rendering of any technical services, not technical qualified staff. Second, the SLTC were also statutory charges and does not involve rendering and technical services. The payment of transmission wheeling SL charges were in nature of reimbursement of actual cost and do not generate any income in the hands of transmission company. This was the contention of the revenue. Transmission of electricity companies, the technical survey requires constant involvement of technical system consisting of sophisticated instruments, constant monitoring, supervision by a person, which is technically right, by a person technically ability and knowledge to operate and manage the system. As regard to SLDC charges, services required technical support, service of technically qualified staff. The fact that contract between the two parties backed by statutory obligation cannot alter the nature of the services rendered. AAR's observation that did not agree with the applicant's contention regarding transmission of billing charges does not constituting fees for technical services that on the ground that no rendering of technical services involving proper form was involved for maintaining proper regulation transmission of electric electric energy. It was not in agreement with the applicant's argument that the services of technical person were not needed for ensuring due and proper transmission of electricity energy from the generation point to the distribution point. The AR concurred with the revenues view that personnel of the transmission company has to ensure regular and consistent transmission of the electrical energy at a great voltage at the distribution point of applicant. So the decision was considering the definition of fees for technical services and percent involved in proper transmission of energy held that transmission and wheeling charges paid by applicant to the transmission are in nature of technical services. In fact, applicant has to withhold tax, therefore, under section 194J. As regard to SLDC charges, it was opined that the main duty of SLDC was to ensure integrity operation of the power system in the state for optimum scheduling and dispatch of electricity within the state. The SLDC charges paid appear to be more of a supervisory charges with the duty to ensure just and proper generation of distribution in the state as a whole. Therefore, such services were not in nature of technical services, resulting does not attract provisions of 94J or 194C. So on one point, TDS has to be deducted, and on the other point, there is no liability of TDS. Question number 7. Discuss the validity of the proceedings in the following cases based on the facts stated therein. Assessing officer made an order of assessment on X, determining the total income at rupees 3,75,000 by order dated 31/3/2021 in respect of assessment in 1930. This was served on assessee 10/4/2021. Tax and interest of rupees were determined subsequently, and demand notice was served on the assessee 5/5/2021. This is a complete insane kind of situation, which is not acceptable in the eyes of law, because whenever any order is served on the assessee, it constitutes three parts: demand notice, assessment order, and penalty initiation proceedings. notice. It may be under section 271(c) or 271(aa)(c), or any kind of penalty has to be initiated along with the assessment order. So this is a completely different situation in which order is passed on some other day and demand notice is issued on some other day, and assessment order is completed when the tax liability is determined as on date, and then only it has to be combined order has to be passed along with the proper tax calculation has to be done, and that should be communicated to the assessee. In this case, none of the conditions is being followed. In CIT versus Purushottam Das Patel, Gujarat was held unless the total income is determined and determination of tax is also done. So, along with the assessment order, total determination of the tax also has to be done. It cannot be said the process of assessment is complete. What section 153 requires that assessment should be completed within the prescribed time limit. The word order of assessment cannot be constructed to be mean assessment of total income only. Those words would mean order in writing whereby the total income assessed and tax payable is determined. Under section 157, no order shall be made would be made under section 143.3 or 144 after expiry of 12 months from the end of the relevant assessment year. In the present case of foresight provisions, since the tax liability is determined after the expiry of time limit of passing the assessment order, which is not even complete under the section 153.1, the assessment is time barred and hence not valid because the tax calculation was done later on, and if the tax calculation is not done along with the assessment order is incomplete, so it is time barred. Question number 8. The regular assessment of Ms. Swati for the assessment year 2017-18 were completed under section 143 on 16/2018. On 18/1/2020, it is received a notice of section 148 for income escaping assessment for the same assessment year 17-18. Further, on 25/3/2020, during the pendency of such proceeding for the income escaping assessment, the AO attaches the property of Ms. Swati. Now, agreed, Swati seeks your opinion, being a chartered accountant, as to why the circumstances under which AO can make provisional attachment of the property, the period of time for which attachment can take place, can the attachment be revoked by the AO? Circumstances, yes, he can to protect the interest of the revenue, AO can make provisional attachment. The period for which, that is 6 months, or it can be extended later on with the private approval. But and this attachment also has to be done with the private approval of the commissioner, chief commissioner, or DG, as the case may be. Can the attachment be revoked? Yes, it can be revoked if the assessee provides security of equivalent amount and ensures that in case tax becomes payable, he will be ready to pay, and the revenue is protected by such heavy amount that in case that may be in the form of cash in the bank. So the solution is, as per to section 280 section 281b, the assessing officer empowered to provisionally attach any property of Ms. Swati by an order in writing during the pendency of the assessment with the prior approval of the commissioner, chief commissioner, or DG for the purpose of protecting the interest of the revenue. This is the most important line here. As per section 281b, the provisional attachment shall be valid for the period of 6 months. However, the income tax authority may extend the period for the reason. First, they have to record the reason in writing. However, the total period shall not exceed 2 years or 60 days after the date of assessment or resettlement, which is later. Next, 281b3 empowers the assessing officer to revoke by order in writing if Ms. Swati furnishes a guarantee from the scheduled bank for an amount loss not less than the fair market value of such provisional attached property, or for such which is sufficient to protect the interest of the revenue. So, money in the bank can be a guarantee, can be a security for the assessing officer for the revenue, that even if they revoke the property, then also in case a tax is levied on the assessee, then they can also recover the tax from the bank. Question number 9. Can the commissioner invoke revisionary jurisdiction under section 263 when the subject matter of revision, whether the manner of allocation of revenue among the members of the EOP would affect the allow ability or the quantum of deduction under section 80 IB, has been decided by the Commissioner of Appeals, and the same is pending before the ITAT. So this is a question of case law. We don't have to go into the facts of the case, but we should know whether the commissioner invoke can the commissioner can invoke jurisdiction under section 263. That is the main question. And first of all, the fundamentals should be clear. Then these fundamentals can be applied in any case law or any practical situation as the case may be. So can the commissioner invoke jurisdiction under section 263? No, for the reason. So I directly come to the conclusion. High Court decision, when the order of the first authority is complete and the appeal is pending before the tribunal, the commissioner is precluded from invoking section 263 for revision of the very same matter decided by the first appellate authority, since the clause C of the explanation 1 to section 263 debars the same. Accordingly, High Court held that order passed by assessing officer, that's the most important part, and this clears the fundamentals, which says that assessing officer order got merged with the first appellate authority and it is pending before the IDAT, and the same very issue cannot be revised by invoking jurisdiction under section 263. And also for the reason CIT appeals has passed an order in favor. So a commissioner, and so there cannot be a fight between commissioner and the commissioner appeals. So they can only be settled by the higher authority. So the commissioner cannot go against the order of the CIT appeals, though they can file an appeal before the ITAT. That's a separate thing, but they cannot revise as per invoke. They cannot invoke provisions of section 263. Thank you.